Welcome students. Welcome back to the lecture series on general psychology, where we are quickly covering all the important topics for your entrance exams as well as a part of a crash course. Okay. So I am Dr. Olivia Kakati Sarma, your faculty at Conceptual Psychology, and in this session we will explore the very essential cognitive processes of thinking and language with a focus on their importance for psychology and clinical applications. Okay, so let us begin our journey. So thinking refers to a mental activity that involves processing of information, okay, forming of concepts, solving problems, and making decisions and reasoning. Okay, so thinking is a complex mental activity which involves information processing, formation of concepts, solving of problems, as well as your decision making and reasoning. Okay, whereas language, on the other hand, is what is we call the structured symbol or the structured system of symbols that we use to, why is it used? To communicate our thoughts. Okay, so language is the structured system of symbols that we use to communicate our thoughts. Okay, and together thinking and language form the backbone of human cognition. Okay, now another important concept here that we need to know about is what we call mental imagery. Now, what is this mental imagery? So mental images are what we call mental maps, okay, or the mental representations of objects, events, or any sort of situations that are not physically present. Okay, they are like pictures in the mind. Okay, and research shows that mental imageries, they activate the similar brain regions as actual perception. For example, in perception, the visual cortex is activated, right? So similarly, even in mental imagery, the similar brain regions are activated. Okay, so we see that mental imagery is very commonly used in our day-to-day life. For example, suppose athletes use visualization to actually enhance their performance, okay, before actually playing a shot in cricket. So any sort of cricketer, they visualize that, okay, if I do this, this will happen. If I do that, that will happen. So they are using mental imagery to visualize the situation before it has already, it has occurred already. Okay, next important concept. So what is this concept? So concepts are mental categories. Okay, they are mental classifications or mental categories which are used to characterize or group different objects or events or certain kinds of characteristics. Okay, so concepts are mental categories which are used for grouping, mental grouping to be precise. Then why are these concepts important? So concepts help us to simplify information processing and guide behavior, and also prevent information overload. Okay, so that is why concepts are very important. Now, there are various types of concepts. For example, your natural concepts. Okay, so natural concepts are the ones which are formed through what? Your everyday experience. Okay, So natural concepts are formed through your everyday experience. For example, you see a bird and know that, okay, this is a bird. A peacock is also a bird. A crow is also a bird. So that is what you are grouping a crow and a peacock into the concept or mental category of what we call the bird. Okay. Then there is the second type called the artificial concepts. So these are not formed from everyday experience, but they are defined by a set of rules. For example, triangle. Okay, there is nothing occurring like that in nature, right? That is defined by a certain set of rules, that if something has this kind of a shape, has three angles, three sides, then that is what we call a triangle. Okay. And finally, another important concept is what we call the prototypes. Okay. So prototypes are the best example of a concept or category. Okay. So for example, when you think of a bird, the first thing that comes to your mind is not a peacock or a crow, but maybe a little birdie like a sparrow. Okay. So what a prototype is? It is the best example of a particular concept or category. Okay. Next, we have what we call the various processes of thinking starting from problem solving. Okay. So what is this problem solving? So problem solving involves or allows us to find solutions to various obstacles. Okay. Finding solutions is what we call problem solving. Okay. Now, how do we solve a problem, or how do we actually find solutions? Okay. So number one is there are various steps actually to solve a problem. The first step being identifying the problem. Okay. So being aware of what the problem is or what is creating a particular problem is the first step of problem solving. Okay. Next is your generating strategies or generating some options of what you can do or some possible solutions. Okay. Next up is your evaluation. Okay. Once you have the possible solutions, when you evaluate, that what solution would be the best fit to this situation or to this problem. Okay. That is your third step or what we call evaluation. Okay. And finally, the final step is implementation. Okay. That once you have a solution, how you implement it to actually solve your problem. Okay. So that is implementation. So 4 steps: identifying the problem, generating strategies, evaluating solutions, and finally implementing it. Okay. Next, we have the various strategies of problem solving. How can we solve a particular problem? So number 1 is the strategy of what we call the trial and error. Okay. Trial and error, as the name itself suggests, is learning by trial and error. Okay. You try out the various solutions and you see this works, this doesn't work, and based on that experience, you decide what is the best possible solution. Okay. Next, we have the algorithms. So algorithms are your step-by-step solution to solve a problem. Okay. These are actually sure shot solutions to solve any kind of problem, and these are usually step-by-step in nature. Very long and detailed step-by-step sure shot solutions to solve a problem are what we call algorithms. Okay. Third is what we call heuristics. Okay. These are very important questions for exams. So heuristics are your mental shortcuts. Okay. We do not always have the mental time and space to follow algorithms in solving every kind of everyday problem, right? So it is then that we apply heuristics or what we call the mental shortcuts. Next, we have the insight or what you call the aha moment. Okay, aha moment of problem solving, or the insight approach to problem solving involves, suddenly you have a realization. You are not able to solve a problem and suddenly you realize, oh, this can be done. Aha, right? So that is your aha moment, or what we call the insight. Next, we have another important process, which is reasoning. Okay, so reasoning, all of you understand? So reasoning more specifically can be divided into two types: deductive reasoning and inductive reasoning. Okay, so when you move from a general principle and draw specific conclusions out of them, that is what we call deductive reasoning. Okay, for example, all humans are mortal, that is why I am mortal. Okay, so that is a kind of a deductive reasoning. Okay, so when you're moving from general to specific, remember that is deductive reasoning. Okay, next we have what we call inductive reasoning. When you are moving from specific examples and trying to make a general conclusion or general principle out of it, that is what we call inductive reasoning. Okay, so for example, if I see that all the swans that I observed are white, I come to the conclusion that all swans are white. Okay, so that is a type of reasoning called the inductive reasoning. Okay, so some of the errors of reasoning include your confirmation bias, belief bias. So what are these? Confirmation bias refers to, when we sort of develop a tunnel vision and we only conform to the ideas, or we only see the ideas which confirm our already existing belief system. Okay, so that can hamper or cause an error in your logical reasoning process. Okay, next we have what we call decision making. Okay, so decision making is the process of evaluating alternatives and choosing a right alternative to find a solution to a particular problem. Okay, or to make a particular choice regarding something. So decision making is influenced by a lot of processes at play. Okay, it is important to note that some of the influences on decision making include heuristics. So we talked about how heuristics are mental shortcuts. Okay, so in decision making also heuristics have a role to play, and the availability heuristic, representativeness heuristic, these sort of influence the decision making process. Okay, next we have overconfidence. So this can be a barrier to decision making. When you are too confident regarding something, you tend to ignore the other possible outcomes or the other possible solutions which are contrary to the alternative that you have chosen. So that can sometimes act as a barrier to the decision making process. Next we have what we call the framing effect. Okay, so framing effect means how information is presented. Okay, how you frame something or how a particular information comes to you influences whether you choose that information as a correct alternative or not. Okay, so that is about decision making. So next we have the cognitive process called creative thinking. So as the name itself suggests, creative thinking refers to generating novel and useful ideas. So what is novel? Novel means unique, something new. Okay, so the process of generating novel and useful ideas is what we call creative thinking. Okay, so creative thinking, when we talk about creative thinking, it is important to know the concept of divergent thinking and convergent thinking. Okay, so what is this divergent thinking? So when you come out with many solutions to one particular problem, that is what we call divergent thinking. So divergent means many solutions, whereas convergent thinking means that from many alternatives you choose one particular kind of solution, or you come at one particular solution. Okay, now coming to the stages of creative thinking, so we see that in creative thinking there are multiple stages. First is the preparation process, where you prepare that you prepare mental maps regarding what the problem is, how you can solve, what are the resources you have, and things like that. Okay, next is your incubation process, where you actually brainstorm and try to find a particular solution. Next is your illumination process. So what happens in illumination? You suddenly have a aha moment, or what we call an insight. Okay, so you realize, okay, this is the solution, I can apply this. Okay, and finally is the process of verification, where you try to apply the solution that you have generated and verify whether that's working for it or not. Okay, so those are the steps for creative thinking. Step 1 is preparation, step 2 is incubation, step 3 is illumination, and finally the last step is verification. Okay, now let's move on to language. Okay, so what is language? Language is a system of symbols which are governed by, so what is it? It is a system of symbols which is governed by what? Rules. And what does it do? What purpose does it serve? It conveys meaning. Okay, it is essential for communication. Now, in case of language, the most important things that you need to know are its properties. Okay, so what are some properties of language? Number 1 is phonology. What is phonology? The sounds. Okay, what sounds certain words create, or what sounds certain, not words, suppose b. So the meaningful units of sound, or the small units of sound, is the domain of phonology. Morphology is the word formation of language. Okay, syntax is your sentence structure. Semantics are your meaning, and pragmatics are the context that you use it in. Okay, so these are very, very important to know: phonology, morphology, syntax, and semantics. Okay, now it is also important to note that language learning is distinctive in nature, because language allows displacement and generativity. Now, what are these? Displacement means it allows us to talk about non-present events. Okay, and similarly, it has a property or element of generativity. That is, it allows infinite combinations. Okay, so when we talk of the nature of language, these are the things that you need to know. Next, we have what we call language development. Okay, so language development occurs in various stages. Okay, so the first stage is what we call cooing, where the child just learns to make certain very small those kind of small sounds. Okay, after that we have babbling, where the child is trying to say some words, but that words are not really making too much of sense. Next, we have the one word speech development, where the child can say one or two one words like go, stay, mama, papa. Okay, So their communication is one word based in this stage of language development. Next, we have the two word stage, where the child cannot form full sentences but uses two words to convey their feelings or emotions. Next, we have what we call the telegraphic stage. So here the child can make use of multiple words but does not make the coherence of a full sentence. And lastly, when the child is able to finally make full sentences to convey meaning or to convey or communicate what they want to say. Now, when we talk about the theories of language development, it can be sort of divided into 2 to 3 types. One is the nativist. Okay, so since this is a crash course and we are short on time, we will only talk about the important points here. Okay, so nativist theory of language was proposed by Noam Chomsky. So as the name itself suggests, nativist means that there is something innate about it. So Chomsky proposed that we have a innate language acquisition device which is there from birth itself. Okay, so he said that language development is innate in nature to some extent. Next, we have Skinner's approach of language development, where he says that language is learned through what? Reinforcement and what we call imitation. Okay, social learning or observational learning. Then nativist, what was the key word here? Language acquisition device. And another important theory of language development is the interactionist approach, which is a combination of the two. So combination of basically nature and nurture. Nature plus nurture. So biology and the environment both have a role to play. It is also important to note the critical period hypothesis. Now, what is critical? This is a very commonly asked question. So critical period hypothesis states that the early childhood is very crucial for language development. Okay, so early childhood is the critical period where language development mostly occurs. Now that we have learned language and thinking, let's proceed on to how language and thinking are connected. Okay, so whenever we talk about language and thinking, connection, here comes the very important hypothesis called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Okay, so the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis says that language influences thought. So whatever thoughts that come to our mind are influenced by our language. This is also known as the hypothesis of linguistic relativity. Okay. Then another approach to connect language and thinking is that thought can actually exist without language. Okay, whereas the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis says that language influences thought, but another approach says that thought can also exist without language. For example, when we talk about mental imagery or pre-verbal infants, so they are also having thoughts, right? But they have not yet learned language. Or in case of mental imagery, we are not like saying things in our head through language to actually form a mental imagery. So these are the exclusions of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Now, why is thinking and language clinically relevant? Because we have to, study language disorders like aphasia, dyslexia, and such kind of language disorders or things like that. They also inform the cognitive models. Okay, so this relationship between thinking and language is important to study in clinical practice as well. So now to conclude I would like to say that thinking and language are both very central to human cognition, and for clinical psychology, understanding them helps not only in assessment or therapy but also in the rehabilitation of cognitive and language disorders. Okay, so I would like to conclude this lesson here, and I would like to conclude by saying that for the exam prep, please focus on definitions, theories, and certain examples and application. Okay, thank you.